welcome to Elements of Ayurveda, Empowering Wisdom of Life. I'm your host, Colette, and in this podcast, I hope to empower you to take charge of your own health by sharing the holistic teachings of Ayurveda, the ancient healing tradition from India. We will also discuss topics like health and wellness, nutrition, yoga, fitness, meditation, breath work, and much more, as well as interviewing lots of inspiring people along the way. My humble wish is to help you to connect to your true nature, to Mother Nature, and to each other. If you like the content, be sure to subscribe to the show, and the new episodes will automatically download for you to enjoy. If you're new to Ayurveda, I recommend you listen to the first couple of episodes where I do an introduction to Ayurveda and the mind-body types. I've also set up a Facebook group for us to connect and to support each other, and I'd love for you to join me over at Elements of Ayurveda podcast group. And now, here's the show. Hello and welcome to Elements of Ayurveda. Today, I'm very happy to introduce you to Madison Madden, who is a NAMA-recognized Ayurvedic doctor, Kundalini yoga teacher, and co-founder of Pacific Coast Ayurveda. Madison specializes in hands-on Ayurvedic applications and women's reproductive health. Her expertise lies in the connection and manifestation of mental, emotional patterns in the physical body, and utilizing hands-on techniques to heal and reverse pathology. She lives in Wolala, California, and is a member of the Center for Applied Consciousness, a collective of artisan-run businesses rooted in yoga, Ayurveda, and environmental stewardship. Madison, welcome to the show, and thanks for taking the time to chat with us today.
Thank you for having me, Colette.
It's wonderful, and I love the Center for Applied Consciousness. What a great concept.
Yeah, we function as a collective, and my teacher's teacher, one day he said, in this coming age, everyone will have consciousness, but they won't know how to apply it. So you have to teach people how to apply their consciousness. So that's the foundation of everything that we do.
That's wonderful. I love that it's artisan-run businesses, but you're working as a collective, which is lovely, and supporting each other.
Yes.
Yeah, what a great concept. Lovely. Well, Madison, what we want to talk about today is the panel presentation that you partook in at the NAMA conference. And this presentation was Integrative Management of Anxiety and Depression. And I know that your focus was on the connections between Ayurveda and modern science as it relates to anxiety and depression. And this is what I really want to talk about today. And before we even dive into that, I'd love for you to tell us how you describe anxiety and depression. It's a big one.
Yeah, it's a big one.
Yeah.
Well, I consider both anxiety and depression to be a mindset that's experienced by the majority, as opposed to a pathology that's experienced by a few. And I actually consider it to be the dominant state of mind that underlies our entire culture, really, right now. It's the backbone of almost every single case that walks in our door in some form or another. It's a big thing. Depression is the second leading cause of disability in the United States, and 40 million Americans are diagnosed with an anxiety disorder. That's 18% of our population, and that's diagnosed. There's 15.5 million people that have been on antidepressants for more than 5 years, and it's meant to be a short-term treatment.
Right.
The big thing that we're dealing with. And how I define anxiety and depression is I define anxiety as a grasp for control when you feel powerless. And I define depression as a seeming resignation to helplessness. So there's this pervasiveness of both of these experiences of the mind that is really, in my opinion, the dominant experience around the globe right now.
Yes, unfortunately it is. And it's not only our modern society, but given what's going on currently in the political system. And you can imagine what this effect is having on the globe energetically at the moment.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And with our climate and the changes that are ensuing, it's really a big deal.
Yeah, because, essentially we all want some hope. And when there's so much disruption going on and so much turmoil, and it's hard to find something to put our hope in when this seems like the big foundations of government and so on are really shaky right now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It creates a feeling of threat in the nervous system, and that creates a systemic experience through the entire body and mind. And if we allow ourselves to just take a passive role in our life in feeling that threat, then we end up having this experience of anxiety or depression, or however you really want to label it, as an underlying experience of life.
Right, and I think many people don't even have the awareness of that level, even a low level of anxiety constantly charging up the nervous system, because it's almost come norm now.
Absolutely. It's the norm.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I'd love to break it down a little bit for people. And you talked at the presentation about the hypothalamus-Pituitary-Adrenal axis. And I'd love for you to break that down for us and how it relates to our stress response system, please.
Sure. The HPA axis, or the hypothalamus-Pituitary-Adrenal axis, is something that's pretty hot in modern medicine right now, has been for a few years. And essentially, in easy language, it's the neuroendocrine stress response system. So essentially what happens is when the system is under threat or perceived threat, the hypothalamus sends a hormonal signal to the pituitary gland, and the pituitary gland sends a hormonal signal to the adrenal gland, and the adrenal gland basically releases cortisol. And cortisol has a systemic effect on the body. It's kind of termed the stress hormone. So the HPA axis is part of what we call the gut-brain axis, and it's the connection between the gut and the brain, and it's working symbiotically with these other systems of the body, like the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system, the vagus nerve, the gut microbiome. All of these things are working systemically and symbiotically together to create what we know of as the fight, flight, or freeze response.
Right.
When our body is in the fight, flight, or freeze response, we are essentially being, chased by a tiger. And we're meant to have this response. It's a biologically normative response that's meant to be stimulated under threat.
Right.
And it's meant to be stimulated once in a while. Unfortunately, most of us are stimulating this response almost all of the time, living in this low to mid-grade stress response all the time, which means that this systemic expression of hormones and endocrine and neurological responses that's going on to create this stress response is then inhibiting all of the things that are meant to be stimulated and functioning the rest of the time. The parasympathetic nervous system, the serotonin, the gut sending signals to the brain to, encourage and crave things that are good for you. When your body's in this fight, flight, or freeze response, it's sending signals to the brain to run fast, think fast, extremities to, do and run or to freeze, instead of sending signals to the gut to, I'm hungry. I want good food for the circulation to be, coming into the gastrointestinal tract to, digest well and stimulate, great circulation, and all of those things that we're meant to be experiencing on a daily basis most of the time. And so the HPA axis is one of those systems of the gut-brain connection.
Right. So essentially it's just shutting down all of the systems of the body, saying there's something serious going on outside, and we need to just be ready to battle.
Yes.
Yeah.
We need to be ready to battle or die.
Right.
Or fake die.
Yeah.
And
yes, like that freeze mode. So you talked about how the axis is connected to the gut, and we understand the gut microbiome is now responsible for 80% of our immunity. So does it shut down digestion? Is it, like you said, it's not sending signals to our brain to eat, to nourish ourselves?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, in connection with the HPA axis, you also have something called the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve is the gut-brain superhighway. It's the neural connection between the gut and the brain. Mm. And it's sending signals from the enteric nervous system, which is in the gut, to the central nervous system in the brain. And so the vagus nerve, when you're experiencing a perceived threat, now is sending signals that you're under threat, and it's encouraging this situation. So you're not looking to nourish yourself, like you said. You're looking to fight, flight, or freeze. So the gut microbiome is full, like you said, of immune cells, of endocrine cells. There's more endocrine cells in the lining of your gut than there is in all of your other organs combined, your thyroid, your pituitary, your gonads, all of those combined. So there's so much going on in the lining of your gut that is meant to be, working together symbiotically to nourish you and, digest your food and, send signals to your brain, to direct you in all of your functions of life. The serotonin, your gut has 95% of the serotonin in your body, the lining of your gut. And serotonin is the major class of antidepressants, the serotonin reuptake inhibitors. Mm-hmm. So when your body is being flooded with cortisol, to fight, flight, or freeze, it's not stimulating the release of serotonin in your gut.
Right. So the complete balance is lost.
Right.
We're just on overdrive all the time, essentially. So then if we're eating in this state, if we're sitting down because this is our normal state in the world, and if we're sitting down and our body is feeling like it's under attack and we do go to eat, what's happening then with the digestive system, with the gut and the microbiome?
Well, you're not digesting well. In Ayurveda, we've been saying that for, millennium now. You have to eat in a calm state of mind in order to digest. Otherwise, you create ama and toxicity. So if you think about it from a scientific point of view, and you're in the stress response, your energy is not in digesting. Your energy is in surviving. So, it's no surprise that you sit down to eat in a stressful state, and you either, some people, sometimes you won't have an appetite, right? Sometimes you'll stress eat. So the microbiota in your gut works to me, it's the same thing as the Jataragni in Ayurveda. It's, we say in Ayurveda that your body craves, when you're in balance, your body craves what keeps you in balance. And when you're out of balance, your body craves what keeps you out of balance. We've all heard that. And it's the same with the microbiome in your gut. They say, your bugs will send signals via the vagus nerve to crave what they want when they're in balance and crave what they want when they're out of balance. So when you're in that stress response, you're gonna crave the things that keep you out of balance. Either you'll lose your appetite, or you'll crave, you'll emotionally eat. You'll crave sugars and starches and fried foods, and you'll reach for things in order to, calm the stress. But ultimately, you're not going to digest it.
Right, exactly. And I do find that a lot, that they're trying to calm the nervous system. Some people do, in fact, use food, try to literally make themselves heavier and to calm the body down.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you mentioned there, Madison, that, Ayurveda has been saying this for millennia about the digestive system being paramount to our overall health. And I'd love for you to share with us how this ancient science of Ayurveda and modern science now connect on this subject, and where are they connecting now on this subject?
It's a wonderful thing because from my perspective, modern science is now showing or proving what Ayurveda has been talking about for 7,000-8,000 years, and putting language to it that we in the English language or in the West understand, right? Mm-hmm. But ultimately, we're talking about the same thing. Ayurveda has been talking about the connection between the gut and the brain and the systemic quality of the mind that pervades the entire body, and the connection between all of these systems, how they're really one system for forever. That's the foundation of Ayurveda is this symbiotic system of the body. And so now as science is making these connections between, the HPA is the neuroendocrine stress response, and the vagus nerve and the enteric nervous system is the nervous system, and the microbiome is the bacterial, virus, fungi that are living in the lining of the gut. So they all, we used to think of all these things in science as separate systems, and now they're seeing these connections that they're all related and they all communicate with one another. They're inextricably linked. And so that's a beautiful thing, because that's really, it's giving us this language, which, and those of us that know and believe Ayurveda, we don't need that, right? We believe what we have had the experience of, and we believe the wisdom of the traditional teachings. But ultimately what it's done is it shows us that we're talking about the same thing.
Which is amazing. So now I'd like to go back to the wonderful science of Ayurveda and talk about how Ayurveda in general, how it sees anxiety and depression and what doshas out of balance.
Sure. Well, in Ayurveda, physical disease or physical illness is looked at through imbalance of the doshas, so vata, pitta, and kapha. While conditions of the mind are looked at through the gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas. And imbalances of the mind are always considered either rajasic in nature or tamasic in nature, because sattva has no pathology. That's why we encourage clients towards sattva in their lifestyle and their mind, because there's no pathology in sattva. So anxiety has more of a rajasic quality to it, and depression has more of a tamasic quality to it. But they're not usually independent of each other. Oftentimes they're interrelated.
Right.
People will experience both, right?
Yeah. So do you think that this tamasic mental guna comes in almost as a protective, just kind of like a shutdown and an inertia and a retarding of things?
Certainly. It certainly can. Yeah. It can be a protection. It can be a response to toxicity in the environment, in the mind, and the body. It can be a shutting down, a hopelessness like we talked about earlier. It can be a shutting down to, feeling like there's nothing that you can do. There's nothing that you want to do. There's all of that at play.
Right. And we understand, and I've talked about it before on the podcast and other episodes, that when you're in a tamasic state, it's quite hard and challenging to pull yourself out of that, because it's such that state of inertia. Yeah,
absolutely. And it requires, we talk a lot about, certain people in the Ayurveda world talk a lot about sattva as, the cure-all of everything, which, that's the direction that we're going. But when you have to remember that in order to get from a tamasic state towards sattva, you have to go through rajas. You can't go directly from tamas to sattva. So
exactly.
Which is kind of an interesting thing, because we have this kind of feedback loop culturally where we have a very rajasic world. And like you were saying, the quality of the rajas that we typically live within doesn't really encourage rajas that leads to sattva. It kind of encourages rajas that leads back to tamas, And that's where I bring in the importance of connection and purpose in life. And that quality of rajas, in my opinion, is what has the potential of transforming a tamasic state of mind and uplifting it, elevating it into action in rajas, and then elevating that hopefully towards sattva.
I love that idea. And it's so true that if we stimulate someone from tamasic state into a rajasic state, but that's, like you said, getting into that loop again and getting overly rajasic and getting overly competitive and maybe greedy and so on, and getting into the burnout, exactly. So tell us a little bit then about how you say we want to get them into the rajasic state, where they're using that spark that they now receive. They come out of the tamasic inertia, the heaviness, the sluggishness, the lethargy, and now they're getting that spark of rajas. But instead of going back into that vicious loop, that now they're going into using that spark for their purpose, using that rajasic spark to go towards sattva. Tell us a little bit about how you nurture it in that way.
Well, my favorite example is 16-year-old Greta Thunberg.
Oh, yeah.
And who probably most of the listeners here have heard of in some way or another. And Greta is a climate activist, and she was, when she was young, 8 years old, I think, she said she went into a depression because she learned about what was really going on with climate change. And she just couldn't understand why nobody was doing anything about it and nobody was talking about it. And so she stopped talking and she stopped eating and she went into a very deep depression. And ultimately, when she was diagnosed with selective mutism and, various other things, and ultimately, eventually, she started talking about it. And she started, coming out, and now she's a globally recognized climate activist who's calling out huge political leaders and has inspired millions and millions and millions of people all over the world, because now she's become this icon of change, right? Yeah. So she she went into this depressive state because she was just completely flabbergasted with the state of the world. And what she sparked at some point and started speaking truth. She's become an icon for speaking truth. She only speaks when she feels like it's necessary, and she feels like this is necessary. So she has taken on this purpose, and she connects deeply with, the experience of the earth, and now she's connected with millions and millions of people, right? Mm-hmm. So she's a great example of that, where it wasn't just, stimulating her rajas by, making her go to the gym. Right. Right. She sparked on this sense of purpose that then made her take action. And that action then led to hope. That's what she says. She says, when you start to take action, hope is everywhere.
Yeah. She is so amazing. You see her rise in social media, and it's just amazing how she is having such an effect worldwide. Anne has spoken at many conferences, like Davos Wealth Conference that took place, I think that was in Switzerland last year, and she's getting up there and using that energy and that power and the authenticity in her voice. And my goodness, the truth is searing from her. And I think that's what's having the effect, especially on adults.
Absolutely. And that's, in my opinion, what we need to encourage in our clients and in ourselves when we're looking at this in ourselves, right? Because each one of us has a dharma, has a gift, has a purpose here on this planet. And so when you're looking at someone who's kind of in the depths of depression or stuck in the spiral of anxiety, it's not there just because. It's not just there randomly. There's a reason that someone's experiencing that. And so what we're looking to do is we're looking to spark and pull out what it is that what are they missing? What are they holding back? What is it that they really are passionate about? What is it that they really care about? And how can we help encourage that sense of purpose and a sense of connection in their life? Because really we're really looking at a really lonely and isolated and separate culture right now. How many times have we heard we're most connected as we ever have been over social media, yet everybody's completely lonely and alone.
Yeah, no, it's a very sad state of affairs. And I totally agree with you. I believe that we each, of course, have a dharma in this world, and that we need to align that dharma with our own personality and speak our authentic truth. And I do believe that some people there's many reasons for depression and anxiety, of course, but I do believe that it's that disconnection to your true nature that can have a profound effect on your well-being.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, and this is what Ayurveda gives us the tools to do. Ayurveda is this self-study, it's this manual for life, which helps us to understand ourselves. And it really is, I believe that part one of that journey is understanding yourself first. And it has to be more internal. But then I'm very key in saying that once you have brought yourself into balance, you're understanding yourself, you're understanding your needs and so on, then there has to be a wider awareness of the world around you. And looking at the bigger picture of things and seeing what is your role or your dharma in the greater oneness of the world. What's your thoughts on that, Madison?
I completely agree, and I think the cure, the transformation of mental illness, so to speak, really does lie in that. In when you can transform your focus from the me to the we,
yes,
from that insular state of survival to, no, there's a purpose here for me, and I can take action. You then take an active role in your life as opposed to a passive role in your life, and you start seeking connection and relationship and seeking purpose and things like that. And I really do, we talk about anxiety and depression on the clinical level. And yes, there definitely is clinical depression and clinical anxiety. But ultimately, I really do believe that in this sense of purpose and in this connection to your true nature, like you said, really does lie the cure to mental illness. And Ayurveda, I believe, has the tools to deal with that in a way that a lot of healthcare traditions don't, because Ayurveda still is built upon the foundation of the body and the soul as both there and important in the healing process. And they're in the Charaka Samhita, one of the traditional texts of Ayurveda. Charaka outlines that physical disease is treated with things like diet and herbs and routine and things like that. In Ayurveda, we love that. We love our Richucharya, our diet and lifestyle recommendations, things like that. But manifestations of disease in the mind are treated through the spirit, through spirituality and prayer and ritual. And so we have to preserve that in Ayurveda if we're really going to address mental illness on our planet, because it gives us the tools to do that, and we're not trying to push any specific type of spirituality onto it. We're looking to help someone spark into what their sense of spirituality within themselves is, and that gives the opportunity to then connect to the larger sphere that you're talking about. It takes it out of the realm of just activism or, just doing, the sense of connection to the soul, connection to the spirituality. It's about pointing someone in the direction of their higher consciousness and then the expression of that.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally agree. And I like the fact you said, that we have to think of Ayurveda as a holistic system. And as it's coming more and more into the West now, we have to be careful that we don't cherry pick things out of this amazing science and this ancient tradition, that we have to respect the wholeness and the intelligence in the wholeness of the system. So we can't just be focused on our doshas or on the dinacharya or so on. We have to look at mindfulness practices and how are we nourishing our soul and our spirituality so that this awareness can flourish and can guide us. And I think that's a very important point that you made, Madison. It's Ayurveda gives us guidelines and it's very individual, and that's beautiful too, that allows us the freedom to choose the path that we want to take. But it is very important to keep that path in the totality of our wellness.
Yeah, and I think it's a delicate balance right now because, this topic that we're talking about right now, this connection between modern science and Ayurveda is fascinating. And it would be very easy for Ayurveda to, now that these connections are being made and we're trying to, make Ayurveda a legitimized health system, and that's recognized by the Western world and things like that, for us to try to fit Ayurveda into the box of the Western way of understanding healthcare. And especially now that these connections are being made, it's like, see, Ayurveda's real, see, But that would be in my opinion, a very dangerous thing, trying to fit a circle into kind of a square box.
Absolutely, yeah, because we're trying to fit a very holistic system, which looks at all aspects of yourself and life, into a more reductionist system, which doesn't work. And I think that we need to be humble and do it the other way around. Embrace this holistic system and bring that in rather than trying to fit it into the more Western system.
I completely agree. I agree.
But there needs to be a big shift in thinking and a letting go of egos in order to do that.
Sure.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, at the conference, you shared, Madison, a case study and on the panel. Can you share that with us today? Because I think would be really interesting for the listeners to hear just a specific case study.
Sure. The case that I included as kind of the narrative of the presentation that I gave was a 47-year-old woman. Her name is Mina, and she came in to see us a few years back. She came in with chronic hip pain, and she was trying to avoid a hip surgery, hip replacement surgery. And among other things, she, was on antidepressants and prescription painkillers, which, by the way, in the United States kill more people than heroin and cocaine combined.
Yeah, crazy.
And, a host of other issues, low digestion, her mamsa and majjadatus, her muscle tissue and nerve tissue were wasting her. She was addicted to sugar and television, and her relationships were unfulfilling, and, whole picture, all those things. Unfortunately, it's not a very uncommon case. It's actually a fairly typical case that walks in. As I walked through in my presentation, the HPA axis and the vagus nerve and the microbiome and, how that connects to Ayurveda, I talked about how her case related to all that. So her Agni is impaired. We look at the longevity of the impairment, and we see how it's affected her immunity, her hormonal balance, her mood. We looked at the history of her on the mental level. She was sexually assaulted by a family member when she was young. She was 12, and when she tried to talk about it to someone, they said to never bring it up again, as to not, break down the family structure. She was married. She had an arranged marriage at the age of 19 and moved in with her husband's family. And she was, emotionally criticized and abused by her stepmother, her mother-in-law, which is a fairly normative dynamic in her culture. And so you have all those things that have created trauma, right? The trauma, when, in Ayurveda, we treat the root cause of imbalance in the body. And so we can't look at the root. Oftentimes we look at the root cause and we say her digestion's weak. That's the root cause. Oh, no. The root cause is the trauma that then the digestive disturbance in the first place. And so when we look at someone like Mina, we see how all of these systems have been affected by that trauma that was never healed, the result. And we can even say, you asked me earlier about, the connection between emotional and mental patterns and their manifestation in the physical body. For her, she was sexually assaulted when she was young, and she came in and she has this chronic hip pain on the left side of her body. The left side is the feminine side of the body. And the hip area is the second chakra, right? So you have this chronic disease that's developed in the zone of the body that was traumatized as a young girl. And then you see all the other systems that have been affected. Her vagus nerve, under threat. She's constantly under threat or perceived threat. Her digestion, her microbiome is affected. Her HPA axis, she's constantly in that stress response. All of those things have affected her immunity, her hormones, her, all of those things. So now she comes in and she's a wreck. You have to do about it. So she's seen various doctors, specialists, even Ayurvedic doctors, and everybody just prescribes her stuff. They just say, just do that, do this, and she's never satisfied with that. She's not healing. She's just getting worse. She's getting on medication after medication after medication. So she came in to see us, and we recommended that she do 7 days of Panchakarma. And when you look at the characteristics of Panchakarma, you see how they address so beautifully all of these things that we just talked about. You see how Deepanapachana, which is the preparation for Panchakarma. It's addressing the microbiome. It's addressing the Agni. It's cleansing the system. It's getting the gut to function in a way that's starting to send signals to the brain that are productive for the body, right? To digest. So then you come in for Panchakarma, and we deep relax her nervous system with all the nourishing preparation procedures like Abhyanga and Marma and Svedana and Shirodhara. And you look at Shirodhara, it's such a good example, right? You're bringing warm oil to the pituitary gland. And so the whole point of Shirodhara is to reverse what we now, what science would say, the HPA response. You're actually reversing that. You're turning off their stress response, and you're stimulating the pituitary gland to secrete its other side of hormones that get you in touch with the intuitive state as opposed to the fear and stress state. So all of these therapies during Panchakarma, they transition the body from a stress response to a rest and digest response. And then we purify the system with Panchakarma procedures like Basti, which enemas, by the way, have been shown to tonify the vagus nerve.
Okay, yes.
As does all the detailed care and attention that we give her each day that starts to make her feel like she has a sense of safety and connection in the world. And so as she's going through Panchakarma, she can sleep for the first time in years. Her hip pain starts go down. Her chronic pain in general over her whole body starts to go down. And it's not a coincidence because she's starting to address the trauma that she's kept to herself all these years. She never told anybody after that about her trauma until she came in and did Panchakarma. So, all of these things are working in synchrony together. And when she goes home after, firstly, afterwards, she left us a review on Yelp, and she said, it was the best experience of my life.
Oh, wow.
Karma, so coming into a health procedure. And so she goes home, and the first thing that she starts doing is just telling everybody about it. She wants everybody to know, like, oh my gosh, this exists, And people literally start saying, did they give you drugs? Like, did they marijuana in those herbs? And we're like, no. And so there's no, that to me, that shows not only that, this therapy, this Panchakarma therapy that is, one of the backbones of Ayurveda is addressing all of these systems that we're talking about on a really and holistic level. And in that experience that she had, she now is starting to seek purpose and connection, right? She goes home and starts to seek purpose and connection. And that's when the hard part starts. And that's the hard part for everyone, is afterwards how to go home and then create change in your lifestyle and in your relationships. And so...
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that. It's amazing to hear that case study. I appreciate you sharing it. And it is true. And I think going back to how you come out of a tamasic state, if for somebody who's listening, who's like, you know, they're feeling depression or anxiety and they're feeling like they don't have, very hard to pull themselves out of it, that a Panchakarma reset cleanse really is the best way to reset yourself, reset your digestion, reset all the systems in your body, give yourself some love by the touch, the loving touch from therapies, from oil. And so take some time out. But I do feel that is one of the most effective ways to help somebody pull themselves out of tamas. What do you think, Madison?
I completely agree. Giving the opportunity, it's kind of, we call it a system reset, it gives you the opportunity to give a system reset and to have the experience of making these changes. You have to change your diet. You have to take your herbs. Your body almost has no choice but to relax its stress response. You're so nourished. And so it gives you a glimpse into reality from that place. And that's a beautiful and effective thing. And then the work then is thereafter. It's how do I preserve this? How do I create this as the new normal in my life thereafter?
Yes, but the key is, like you said, it gives the client a glimpse. They get that direct perception because, as you know, we could talk until we're blue in the face and say how amazing it is. But it's when somebody feels it in their own body and feels like, oh, this is what it feels like to be in balance. And this is what it feels like to have a calm nervous system and so on. That once you get that glimpse of that state of balance, you know then what you're striving for. And there's more incentive then to bring in those good dinacharya, those daily self-care practices and the good diet and so on.
Absolutely. Because it's an experience. It's not a thought.
Exactly. And so, Madison, can you tell us where people can find out more about you and also your offerings?
Sure. We have a Ayurvedic clinic, Panchakarma Center educational facility in Wallala, California, which is Northern California, about 2.5 hours north of San Francisco. But we see people from all over the world via phone and Skype for Ayurveda consultations. And we also are in the Los Angeles and San Francisco areas once in a while. And you can find us at pcayurveda.com is our website.
Great. And I'll put a link to that in the show notes, everybody. So thank you for that. And Madison, can you share with people out there, somebody today who's feeling that inertia, feeling that feeling of hopelessness right now? What words of wisdom would you like to share with them today?
That you have a purpose here and that you have a gift that you're here to give and share. And if you can take one step towards that today, if you can share that with one person today and do that every day from here on out, you'll start to walk down a new path, and that it's okay. You're not just randomly depressed. It's not happening to you. There's a reason that you feel the way that you do, and it's calling on you to shift the way that you're living. It's calling on you to bring a part of yourself forward that you haven't been used to. It's calling on you to face the fear of speaking up and speaking truth and bringing the real you to the world.
I love it. That's perfect. Thank you so much, Madison. Thank you for joining us today. And I think this information will really help people out there as well. And thank you for those last beautiful words. Just so encouraging. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for conversing.
Oh, it was lovely. I really enjoyed our conversation. And for everybody out there, please check out pcayurveda.com, and I'll put the link in the show notes also. Madison, take good care of yourself, and thank you again for taking time to chat with us today.
Thanks, Colette.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Such an interesting and I think very hopeful conversation there with Madison. Ayurveda gives us a lot of hope and helps us to understand that things like stress and anxiety and depression are just an imbalance. And if we get to the root cause of those imbalances, we can restore calm in the body and the mind. And if you're feeling hopeless or you're feeling that you're suffering from stress, anxiety or depression, please reach out. You have Madison's information there, or reach out to me. I have that free discovery call. I can give you tips and guidelines, and you can get that on elementshealingandwellbeing.com/services. Also, please share this episode with anyone you feel would benefit from this information. As I said, you can find out all my info and services, my upcoming French Riviera, Ayurveda and Yoga Retreat on my website, elementshealingandwellbeing.com. Thank you for tuning in. I appreciate your support, and I look forward to connecting with you soon. Take good care of yourself and be well. Ciao for now.